So this is just going to be a quick absolute beginner's guide or a guide for stupid people because I'm stupid people on understanding how to set up an off-grid power system for your cabin, your RV, your camper. And this is from somebody who's by no means an expert. I wanted to explain this because I had some friends come over and uh, they were coming over to look at this system, and Jay, it was Jay and Elaine from Alaska Freedom, and Jay had the same issue that I had. Way too much information on the internet and way too hard to understand. But once he saw what I did here, and I explained to him how the system worked, you could see the lights go on. And for me, that was a big deal too. Once I saw a couple other systems in action and I could figure everything out, that's when the lights went on for me too. I'm Sean in Alaska. I hope this video helps. So I think that I need to kind of explain to everybody what I've done here for a basic solar battery operated cabin. And the reason why I want to make this short video on that is because I had some friends over. Jay and Eileen were over yesterday from Alaska Freedom, and he's getting ready to do electrical, and he was having some issues with trying to mentally understand how everything worked. And I was in the same boat when I did it, and I found a couple of different websites, a couple of different YouTube channels that really got in depth on it, and it kind of fried my mind. So this is a basic, simple 12-volt system. The most expensive part of this entire system is going to be your batteries. And I probably should mention that these Vader are 300 amp hour, 12.8 volt LiFePO4 batteries are a huge game changer for me. It's just been phenomenal how well these have worked. But not so much the batteries as we're going to talk about how, just imagine any batteries here, how this whole system works. And for me, the easiest way to explain when you're going to do this is this system all runs off of bus bars. Okay, and that's what these are called. These are called bus bars. And you've got a positive and you've got a negative coming out of your battery. And all of the positive functions are going to go through this bus bar, and all of the negative functions are going to go through this bus bar. Okay? When you're setting up any kind of off-grid cabin or off-grid power situation or trailer or RV or camper, you have to decide right off the bat how much is going to be common everyday electrical, meaning 110, 120 volt items, like your microwaves, your coffee makers, your refrigerators, your freezers, that kind of stuff. And how many of your things are going to be 12 volt that you can get away with 12 volts. So and the reason why I say that is because this system is kind of a hybrid of both. So everything that's going to be 110 is going to go through my inverter, and everything that's going to be DC direct current, because 110 is alternating current, AC. Everything that's going to be DC is just going to go through this DC power box. So your positive comes into your positive bus bar. From there, it goes to your inverter, but it also goes to your DC controller. Now, if this is a 12 volt system, what's going to happen is that anything that goes into, if this is 12 volt positive going into a 12 volt box, that means that every one of these fuses and connections in here are 12 volt. All right. So the negative comes into your bus bar, and then the negative goes into that 12 volt box as well as the inverter. So everything here stays 12 volt, and everything on the other side of the inverter, or DC, everything on the other side of the inverter becomes AC 110. I have opted to have as much 12 volt as I possibly can because for efficiency's purposes, if it's 12 volt to begin with and it's 12 volt at the end, there's really not a lot of loss in this. Where you're going to have loss going from 12 volt into an inverter and then out to your appliances that you have. So this is, right now, the only thing that's connected to this is my refrigerator and a couple of outlets. But the outlets, I only have the one outlet that's constantly on, and that's the refrigerator one. And then I have a backup outlet in my kitchen for when I'm doing anything that requires my vac pack, my cryo pack for fish and for meats and stuff like that. I could put that on my counter. This 12 volt is my lighting in the kitchen. It's my lighting in here as well. We'll talk a little bit about the inverter here too. Oh, before we get away from that, so I'm on solar not much. And mainly what I use to charge everything up with right now is a generator. And in order to charge these batteries, I needed a battery charger that had enough amps to be able to fill this in a quick fashion. So imagine your regular car battery. It generates about 10 amps of power when it's charging, when it's on a full charge, or you can buy one that does 10 amps. And this is a 300 amp hour battery, so 10 divided by 3 means it's going to, or 300 divided by 10 means it would take roughly 30 hours to top this battery off. Is that right? Yeah, 30 hours to top off one battery. So what I opted to do was to get an 80 amp charger, and this is a LiFePO battery charger for 14.6 volts. That, right, the positive is wired into the positive bus bar, and the negative is wired into the negative bus bar. So when the generator is charging, it's not only sending a charge to these batteries, but it's powering the entire system. And it just makes it super easy to wire everything right into the bus bars instead of charging the batteries themselves. So the only other connection that you really have to worry about in your system, if you're running it off a battery to charge it, is if you're incorporating solar as well. So I have one solar panel right now. It's just more than anything to play around with solar. I plan on installing a bigger solar system here in the next couple of months. But that solar panel comes into this DC switch so that I can break the circuit on here. And then from that into this MPPT Smart Solar Charge Controller, and this is a 150, which means it'll take 100 volts or 50 amps. It goes into the solar charge controller, and then from there it goes out of the solar charge controller. The positive goes into the positive bus bar, the negative goes into the negative bus bar. Again, everything is based around the bus bars. And if you connect everything that way, if you think in those terms, it'll be a whole lot easier. So this is going to get a whole lot more use going down the road. But in Alaska, I'm probably always going to have to use a generator to top everything off. Now, we're going to talk about the inverter a little bit. This is a 2200 watt pure sine wave inverter. If you're going to buy an inverter, buy a pure sine wave inverter, because the electronics that you're going to run like a pure sine wave inverter much more than they like a modified or unmodified inverter. Modified you can kind of get by with, but there's no sense in buying a modified sine wave inverter. Just buy a pure sine wave inverter. This is 2200 watts. The best way I can explain this to you is there's a ton there's a ton of calculators online at different solar companies that you can use for free to calculate how big your inverter needs to be and how big your battery bank needs to be. I don't think that the calculators work the way that people would expect them to work, and I'm going to give you an example, because the only thing I really run off of this is the refrigerator. So when that refrigerator is running, and I think it might be running now. Come on. Okay, it is. When it's running, it's drawing 100 volts out of my system. All right. But it only runs about a third of the day. So, I mean, basically, you could say that it's drawing 2,400 watts, right? If it ran every hour, divide that by 3, and it's really only drawing 800 or 900 watts out of the system every single day while it's running. And that's where I think the calculators mess up. But what you want to do is you want to think about this number based on how many appliances you'll have running at the same time. So if I've got a, say, microwave running that's 1,500 watts, and then my refrigerator comes on, that's another 100 watts, now I'm at 1,600 watts. Do you understand what I mean by that? So you want to plan for your inverter size based on everything that could be running at the same time. Now, if you had 100 watts of lights, now we're at 1,700 watts. If you had a freezer that might kick on, maybe we got another 80 watts. All right, so let's just call that 1,800 watts. So by going with a 2,200 watt inverter, I've limited how many electrical items I can actually have in the cabinet at one time, but it is no big deal to just switch this out to a 5,000 watt inverter. All right. If I do that, all I have to do is pull the inverter off the wall, disconnect the positive and the negative, pull the inverter off the wall, and reconnect the positive and negative to the new inverter. It is that simple. So again, the bus bars are where everything happens, and this can be interchanged in 5 minutes with no problem whatsoever. But in the beginning, it's probably not a bad idea just to go a little bit over what you think you're going to need, and then you'll have a built-in cushion for a bit. I hope that explains in a lot better detail and a lot easier detail how my electrical system works and how easy this actually is to size for your cabin and set up to begin with. For me, it was really hard to grasp all this stuff in the beginning, and now, since I started thinking along the lines of bus bars, it's a lot easier for me to do. Now, there are a few other things in the system that I'll point out real quick before we get done, and I'll do that using my cell phone. So on the battery itself, and the battery, like I said, is going to be your most expensive item. But if you get chintzy on your batteries, you're going to be very sorry you did. So on the battery, right? On the positive side, I have a 200 amp, or I'm sorry, what is that? 300 amp fuse set up. So that fuse will blow before there's any damage done to this battery, and that's the only reason why that's there. This is also a fusible switch, so that will blow before there's any problems. I think that's 200 amp as well. And I could probably have another fuse or two in this system, and I more than likely will include them as I go down the road. But in the beginning, this is great for, you know, your basics of running a refrigerator, or you want to watch a movie, or you want to run a laptop, and you don't want to worry about, you know, where your power is going to come from. This is a super simple way to do it. An inverter like this has two 110 receptacles on the outside here, and then it's also got one, and I've got it right here, one Type-C charging cord connected, and so I'll charge up my power brick for my phone so I don't have to keep plugging it into here or plugging my phone into my other electrical outlets. It just makes it super easy to do. Anyway, if you got any questions on this and I can help, I'm not an expert, but by all means, feel free to reach out, leave a comment down below as to what you think. Thank you guys, as always, for watching the channel. I am Sean in Alaska, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I got a bunch of stuff I got to get done, and this is probably going to come out as a bonus video, meaning that it won't be part of my normal Friday routine. But if you're interested in some knucklehead who doesn't know how to do any of this, trying to teach himself how to do all of this, I would greatly appreciate you checking through some of the other videos and possibly subscribing if you're interested. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.